time of the Palm Sunday and the triumphant entry as we look and worship Palm Sunday, remembering the time from that day that Jesus came into town riding on a pony, donkey, and the whole city turned out to welcome him. Now, they had a lot of misunderstandings. They thought he was coming in to take over, to just and deliver them from Rome, to deliver them from all the oppression that they had. And frankly, Jesus would have had the power at that time to do that. The whole city basically was behind him and expecting him to really come home and have a political takeover. And so he came. The city poured out upon the streets, crying Jehovah, King of kings and Lord of lords. There are a lot of times that Jesus comes today to express and to ask those to come and welcome him. A lot of times we feel like he's coming for the wrong reasons. Can't tell you how upset I get about preachers or religions that stick their nose into political things instead of those things of the heart. But he came, and he expected the city to come out, and they did. Several years ago, I had the privilege to wander through the Berlin Museum there in Germany. And here in this great museum are some of the world's most priceless works of art. Here hang great paintings from some of the greatest artists of history of this world. Here hang some of the world's great portraits. As I think of all these, I'm going to wait for Julie and her entourage to follow her down the aisle. I'm sorry, you just caught my attention. I thought Julie was coming up on the platform. Anyway, where was I? I think of all these great masterpieces, and the thought crosses my mind that the greatest works of art ever here on canvas, etched upon the heart of man. And so take your paintbrush of your heart this morning and paint your imaginations. And on the easels of their minds, paint a portrait of Jesus with me this morning. Jesus the conqueror. Jesus the Savior. Jesus the Lord. Let's turn our minds back to the city of Nazareth, where we find a young man closing a carpenter shop. He puts the tools away and fondles and cleans them gently. This would be his last day in the shop. He starts to leave and then turns, and setting his shoulders with determination, he turns and walks to the door. He looks out into the sunset, and as he stands there in the cool of the evening, he hears the cries of the blind, the leper, He hears of souls lost in sin. And in the far distant he sees the gates of Jerusalem. And on a hill beyond a cross. And Jesus steps out of the door. And sets foot toward the sunset. And begins his ministry. I've often visualized in my mind what would have that day been like? For some reason, I think it was a sunny day. For some reason, I feel like it was a day that the city had never had quite like that before and never would have again. The day that Jesus came. And I think it must have been a glorious day. For many, many people, for the wrong reasons. But thankfully, for some, the right reasons. Picture with me and the portrait in your mind, Jesus, the man of humility. It says he came on one of the least precious things you could imagine. On the foal of a donkey. Very humble. You realize Jesus could have very easily, with the whole world behind him at that moment, he could have come and taken a chariot from the Romans and rode into the city behind great and wonderful and beautiful horses on a big, beautiful chariot, arrived in Jerusalem. But he didn't. Jesus was a humble man. And I think the reason that Jesus came this way on this mode of transportation in the city is because Jesus was the Son of God, and yet he came to show humility. He could have called legions of angels and come in glory, but he chose that lowly beast of burden to say to the world, I come not as earthly king, but I come as spiritual king. Shouldn't we feel a little bit more like that today? Feel a little bit ashamed of our lack in humility in this day? I remember years ago, many years ago, before they invented snow, I think, but where we were going to take the youth group up to Mount Hood for a ski day. And I was just preaching to those guys in my van, we had several going, how they should be so careful, because they're going to step out of the car and it's going to be slick. I just told them time after time, now be really careful. And just as I was stepping out of the car, I was saying be very careful, until my feet went out from underneath me and I slid down the bank. You know, it's hard to be anything but a person of humility when you do something like that. Jesus wanted to show, I've come as a humble person. I'm one of you. We become, or should become, somewhat ashamed of our lack of humility. People are looking too often to say, look at all that I've done. Look at all that I take care of. Look what I do. say it's an eye disease. We're too close between the eyes. Eye this, eye that. My Jesus was a humble man. You know, a good exercise is to do something and then keep it a secret. Try it. Do something great for a person, the church, and then just completely never say anything about it. Yeah, you know what I mean. We want our recognition. We want to be lifted up. And sometimes I say, well, go ahead, because we need it done, whether you get recognized or not. But it's a good exercise. I actually once